Hi, friends. I thought I would seek out some additional wisdom for us around what we need to know with Jupiter moving into Gemini in the universe and in our personal charts. So, in your personal chart, first of all, everything in the universe moves in cycles. So, the Jupiter cycle is approximately 11 and three quarter to 12 years. The last time Jupiter was in Gemini, it moved in on June 12th of 2012 and it stayed in Gemini for a year through June 26th of 2013. So you could think back what you were what was happening in your life at that time 12 years ago. What was expanding, growing, taking on more space in your daily life, but also on a spiritual soul level? Like, where were you feeling inspired? Where did you have new visions, ideals, a sense of, wow, something is possible here, something big, something joyful. Jupiter has a sense of optimism, faithfulness, abundance that goes with it, right? It feels like a blessing. Um, it also could go to the extreme of like what felt like it was a lot. It was just a lot, maybe more than you felt you had the capacity to work with at that time, something really blowing up in your life. So, think back 12 years ago. What was happening in 2012 to 2013? I just did this kind of memory lane trip for myself. And actually opens up my photo album, my digital, from 2012, 2013 to see what was happening. My kids were in middle school and high school. My daughter graduated at the end of that Jupiter return from high school. There was a lot of looking at colleges. My son was a competitive diver. There was a lot of traveling all over the country for different meets. And my youngest was just getting ready, seventh grade, and studying for his bar mitzvah. So there was like, it's funny as a parent, if you're a parent, you can relate to this. When you think back, you think more in terms of, okay, how old were my kids at those ages? What were they doing? Because that really dictated a lot of my life at that time. But it's interesting for me in my chart, and you would look at your chart and see where do you have Gemini in your chart. Gemini for me is in my third house, and it's my fourth house cusp of home family. So when Jupiter moved into Gemini, it was in my third house, which was about teaching, learning, communication. I was definitely doing a lot of that at that time. My client base was growing in astrology, in yoga. I was teaching all around the county in different places, schools, synagogues. I was learning a lot. I was like rapid fire, learn, new knowledge, new information. I was learning tarot. I was learning more Kabbalah, mysticism. So think about for you, Jupiter is also about expansion, and Gemini is about learning and communication and languages and local travel. I was doing a lot of travel within the United States, taking my son to meets, taking my daughter to see schools. I probably was in 12, 15 different cities, states within the country in that 1 year period. So look at that in your chart. Um, and then for me, it's also my fourth house, and fourth house is home and family. So, wow, what was really big going on in my life at that time? There was a lot of stuff that was about my children. So, for you, it might be ninth, 10th house, which might be international travel, higher education, and career. What are you doing in your work life? If it's in your seventh house, it might be more about your intimate partnerships, relationships. First house, more around yourself. 12th house, kind of healing the past and bringing things to consciousness and going deeper into spirituality. So please take a look in your chart and see where this Jupiter energy is happening. Take that trip down memory lane and try to remember what was going on in 2012, 2013. You could go back farther than that and say, oh, what was happening in 2000, 2001? What was happening in 1988? So, and if you have an ephemeris, you could be more exact about that. If you do have my book on Jupiter, it lists out all the dates that Jupiter was in any given sign, so it's in there as well. But right now, I wanted to do a tarot reading for us. I've never ever done a live tarot reading on a recording like this. In real time. Let's just see what the universe wants us to know about Jupiter moving in Gemini, what we might want to hold in the background of our consciousness, or maybe with a lot of intention in the foreground in terms of how we approach this big new shift of energy. Okay, so I just invite the cards to show us something that will be useful and helpful for us. with the understanding that we can either take and use this information or completely reject the information. We have our own free will, and this is really just to inspire or help us if it does, and we can walk away from whatever it's showing as well. Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to pull three cards just to kind of get a sense of like, hey, what do we need to focus on? Oh, interesting. Okay, so I just show you. I pulled this card first and then this and this. So we have a King of Cups, we have the Tower, and we have the Ten of Cups. So let's talk about what that could mean, what information is coming up. It's interesting that no air, just swords, right? Gemini is the suit of, Gemini is a mutable air sign, and no air came up in the reading. We do have the King of Cups, which is really about, okay. Okay. So here's what I'll say about the King of Cups. Cups are around our emotional life, right? And our ability to feel and really, really feel what we're feeling and perceive on the level of just taking in, perceive what other people are feeling, have some emotional intelligence. But the King of Cups, even though it's the highest kind of masculine archetype in terms of like how I hold my heart, there's something quite this card always strikes me as not super heart open, not super overly sensitive. There's a sense of groundedness and containment and control around our emotional lives. So, what's interesting for me about that with Jupiter is Jupiter tends to be really big. And Gemini is a lot of thinking, a lot of moving, a lot of ideas, a lot of like scatteredness. And there's something about the King of Cups which might be advising us to really not allow all that big mental energy to also dysregulate our emotional lives, right? Sometimes a lot of information coming in triggers us emotionally, and we start to feel very unsettled and we're reactive, reactive, reactive. And maybe the King of Cups is reminding us that we have the ability to master our emotional responses to whatever information is coming to us and through us, right? So, how do we practice feeling and sensing and sitting with what is showing up in us in response to something new that we've learned or heard or a conversation we've had? How do we sit with that emotion? How do we hold it, right? And how do we stay in our own mastery and our own power? Okay, so that might be some good advice for Jupiter Gemini season. The second card that came up is a card that most people and most tarot readers don't necessarily want to see. The Tower is a card. First of all, it's a card that's connected with the planet Mars. Mars will be moving into Gemini soon. Not yet. I don't have those dates right in front of me. I'll do a follow up on Mars and Gemini. But um, Mars is a destructive energy. And the Tower is a card that is very much about whatever we've built for ourselves, whatever we thought we knew, whatever we structures in our lives we've been, safe and solid and depending on, those need to shift and change, whether consciously with our own action or unconsciously, something comes and sets fire. That lightning flash from the sky just blows it open, and that structure starts to crumble, maybe in a catastrophic way. And we need to move on. We need to move on. So it really is a card about radical change. Um, how can that inform how we move into Jupiter and Gemini season this coming year? So it could look like with Jupiter and Gemini, you have some really big new ideas, new vision, a new sense of optimism and faith around what else you can do, learn, where you can go, what you can experience. And then there's this part of you that resists that change. That even though there's a spark of like, oh my gosh, this could be amazing, this could lead to my abundance and joy, there's that part of you that's very cautious, very fearful, coming up with evidence for why that might not be good, or in the past we know this happened and that happened, and what if I fail? I think this card might be advising us to have faith, right? To have faith that wherever we land is going to be okay. It's where we need to land, maybe. Um, I don't know. For me, I'm leaning into the faithfulness of this, and maybe the newness and change is not always destructive. Newness and change can be very, very constructive. And the more we resist it, the more we suffer. But when we decide to move and lean into that change, we can really shift our mental attitude around it so that it becomes something very positive, right? That we're embracing. So I'm going to leave that one as embracing change. You can take it or leave it again as you need. Um, and the final card in the reading is the Ten of Cups. So the Ten of Cups, tens are endings, right? It's the absolute apex kind of completion of a cycle. So we seek joy and love in our lives. We seek partnership and, family, and we seek this feeling of being celebratory. Like emotionally, we're content, we're fulfilled. And this is like, okay, so what have you been seeking? And maybe this year with Jupiter moving into Gemini gives you again a new sense of joy and happiness and faith around really, really, really manifesting this, like really manifesting this, right? So, what would bring you more joy? Who do you want to be spending time with? Who do you want to celebrate with, and how do you want to celebrate? What fills your heart? Where do you feel like, yes, my cup is overflowing? That's a very Jupiter kind of feeling. I'm so full that I'm overflowing. Like my cup is so full, I can't even maybe receive more until I pour some out because it's just literally full. What would it feel like to move into this year ahead, knowing and believing that it is possible to really feel full and abundant of love, of, you know, contentment, of joy. So that's just some advice. The cards brought to you, again, you'll know how and where that may apply to you personally, whether it's about your work, your relationships, some new project, your physical health, some vision you've had for a long time that maybe you haven't wanted to dive into. And now it feels like, wait, but what if I could? And would this bring my happiness and joy? And what if I stop resisting? And maybe if I just stay grounded and regulated, I can actually see this through. So, anyway, I hope that that is helpful for you. I'll be back again, as we move forward, but reach out to me anytime I can help. Bye.